Rising tensions. U.S. weighs military options amid escalating crisis with Iran. In a rapidly developing international crisis, officials in the United States are weighing potential military action against Iran amid escalating tensions in the Middle East. According to reporting from CBS News, senior U.S. defense and intelligence officials have intensified preparations for possible military strikes, while diplomatic channels remain active but fragile. The situation marks one of the most serious confrontations between Washington and Tehran in recent years, raising concerns among global leaders about the possibility of broader regional conflict. Background of the crisis. Tensions between the United States and Iran have long centered on Tehran's nuclear ambitions, regional influence, and support for proxy groups across the Middle East. Over the years, disputes over sanctions, maritime security in the Persian Gulf, and military activities in neighboring countries have repeatedly pushed the two nations to the brink of confrontation. Recent intelligence assessments suggest that Iran has accelerated certain aspects of its nuclear development program, prompting renewed alarm among U.S. officials and allied governments. Although Iranian authorities insist their nuclear activities are peaceful and intended for civilian energy production, Western powers argue that uranium enrichment levels and technological advancements exceed what would be necessary for purely civilian purposes. This latest escalation reportedly follows a series of military maneuvers and warnings exchanged between the two sides. U.S. officials claim that Iran has increased military readiness and expanded its regional operations. Meanwhile, Iranian leaders accuse Washington of provocative military deployments and economic pressure tactics. U.S. military preparations. According to defense sources, the Pentagon has increased readiness levels across several military assets stationed in the Middle East. Naval strike groups, long-range bombers, and missile defense systems have reportedly been repositioned to strategic locations. These moves are described by officials as precautionary and defensive, aimed at deterring aggression rather than initiating conflict. The Pentagon has declined to confirm operational specifics, but acknowledged that contingency plans are being reviewed. Military planners are reportedly considering a range of options, from limited precision strikes on specific military facilities to broader operations targeting infrastructure tied to nuclear or missile development. Senior administration officials emphasize that no final decision has been made regarding direct military action. However, they stress that the United States retains the right to defend its forces, allies, and interests in the region. Diplomatic efforts continue. Even as military preparations advance, diplomatic discussions have not entirely collapsed. Officials from several European countries are reportedly working behind the scenes to revive negotiations aimed at reducing tensions and preventing escalation. The United Nations has called for restraint from both sides. The UN Secretary General urged all parties to prioritize diplomacy, warning that a full-scale military confrontation could destabilize an already volatile region and have global consequences. International diplomats are particularly concerned about the potential collapse of remaining nuclear agreements and monitoring frameworks. If military strikes occur, experts fear that Iran could withdraw from international inspection arrangements, making future oversight even more difficult. Regional implications. The Middle East remains a complex web of alliances and rivalries. Any direct conflict between the United States and Iran could quickly expand beyond bilateral confrontation. Countries in the Gulf region are reportedly on heightened alert, reinforcing air defenses and reviewing emergency protocols. Oil markets have already reacted to the uncertainty, with global prices experiencing volatility amid fears of supply disruptions. The strategic waterways of the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes, are considered particularly vulnerable. In previous crises, Iran has threatened to disrupt shipping in the area if attacked. Meanwhile, Israel has closely monitored developments. Israeli leaders have repeatedly expressed concerns about Iran's nuclear capabilities and regional influence. While no official statement indicates imminent Israeli involvement, analysts suggest that any U.S. action could trigger coordinated or parallel responses from regional actors. Political reactions in Washington. Within Washington, debate over the appropriate response to Iran remains intense. Lawmakers from both major political parties have expressed concern about the potential for another prolonged military engagement in the Middle East. President Donald Trump, addressing reporters, stated that all options remain on the table, but emphasized a preference for strength combined with diplomacy. He described Iran's recent actions as provocative, but said that a final decision on military action would be based on national security assessments and consultations with allies. Some members of Congress have called for explicit authorization before any large-scale military strike, arguing that constitutional oversight is essential in decisions of war and peace. Others argue that swift executive action may be necessary to deter threats. Economic consequences. Beyond immediate military risks, the crisis carries significant economic implications. Global energy markets have reacted sharply to the possibility of conflict, with oil futures fluctuating in response to each new development. Investors worry that sustained instability in the Middle East could disrupt shipping lanes, increase insurance costs, and impact supply chains. Energy-dependent nations in Asia and Europe are particularly sensitive to shifts in Gulf oil exports. Additionally, renewed sanctions or retaliatory economic measures could further strain Iran's economy, which has already faced years of restrictions. Analysts warn that economic pressure, while intended to compel policy change, can also intensify domestic hardship and fuel nationalist sentiment. Military experts weigh in. Defense analysts caution that even limited strikes carry unpredictable consequences. While modern precision-guided weapons can target specific facilities with high accuracy, retaliation could take asymmetric forms. Iran possesses a network of regional allies and proxy groups capable of launching missile attacks or engaging in cyber operations. Cybersecurity experts warn that critical infrastructure, including financial systems and energy networks, could become targets in a broader conflict. In recent years, cyber warfare has emerged as a powerful tool in geopolitical disputes, often operating below the threshold of open armed conflict. Retired military commanders note that deterrence often depends on credibility and clarity. Mixed signals, they argue, can increase the risk of miscalculation. Clear communication channels, even between adversaries, are vital to preventing unintended escalation. Public opinion and global response. Public reaction to the crisis has been mixed. In the United States, polls suggest that while many Americans view Iran's actions as concerning, there is limited appetite for another extended military campaign abroad. Across Europe, leaders have urged de-escalation. Several foreign ministries released statements emphasizing the importance of diplomacy and adherence to international law. In Asia, major economies have expressed concern about energy security and called for restraint. China and Russia, both of whom maintain relations with Iran, have criticized the potential use of force and encouraged dialogue. Possible scenarios. Experts outline several possible paths forward. 1. Diplomatic breakthrough. Renewed negotiations lead to a temporary agreement, easing tensions and halting military preparations. 2. Limited military strike. The United States conducts targeted strikes designed to deter further escalation without triggering full-scale war. 3. Escalatory cycle. Initial military action leads to retaliatory measures, potentially expanding into a broader regional conflict. 4. Prolonged standoff. Military assets remain on alert, but neither side initiates direct action, resulting in sustained tension and economic uncertainty. Each scenario carries risks and uncertainties. Much will depend on leadership decisions in the coming days and the effectiveness of back-channel diplomacy. The stakes for the region. The Middle East has experienced decades of conflict, and many nations are still recovering from previous wars. A direct confrontation between the United States and Iran could further destabilize fragile governments and inflame sectarian divisions. Humanitarian organizations warn that conflict could displace civilians and disrupt aid operations in already vulnerable areas. Regional economies, many of which rely heavily on trade and energy exports, could suffer severe setbacks. Moreover, any disruption to global oil supplies could have ripple effects far beyond the region, affecting inflation, transportation costs, and economic stability. A critical moment. As military assets remain on alert and diplomatic envoys work behind the scenes, the world watches closely. The coming days may prove decisive in determining whether tensions de-escalate through